It's time for another Flashpoint Q&A. This week we have Neil and Nifty, double N's coming in, Contact and Envy representing our partner teams. We are going to be doing a Q&A, so if you guys have questions, go ahead and drop them in the Twitch chat. I think probably Wednesday is the day we're going to be doing this most of the time now. We did have to swap around some of the other shows that Thorin and I do, so trying to find a good time to do this and answer all of your questions. To start off, FPX is still in Flashpoint. They just don't have a team right. Yes, they paid the monies. They have the slots. They are acquiring a roster, allegedly. So that's going to be the issue with FPX. So hopefully we will hear something about that soon. If you guys want to talk about more of the ownership stuff, a lot of that was answered last week while Thorin was at Blast when Dan Fiden from the president of Cloud9 was on the call. So we guys, we can't we can't speculate on future roster decisions. But here's a good one for you guys. After seeing the limited amount of play and MIBR's admittedly better performance at Blast, thoughts on TRK, Thorin? You were doing the analysis for that event. Uh-oh.
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted. You're muted.
Seemed like an upgrade over Mayan, although I also do think it's a bit unfair because Mayan was very young and wasn't used, as far as I can tell, at all in that team. They literally just had him in like what I call the old NIP fifth man slot, which is like being the fucking wife of Bluebeard. So we all know how that one goes. Difference is now it actually looks like TRK actually like it looks like they actually worked with him to integrate him into the team. So it looked promising so far. Plenty more problems than him in the team though.
Have you scrimmed against MIBR recently, Nifty? How are they doing? What's your opinion on their roster?
Unfortunately, we haven't been able to play too much in the past few weeks because we had players experience passport and visa issues.
Shit.
So yeah, we haven't been able to get the practice in that we wanted to. But we've still been keeping an eye on all the games, from Blast and DreamHack and stuff. So, it's interesting that you mentioned TRK because he had been a part of Team 1 for like so long, man. He a long time. I just remember playing against him even back on like Renegades when he was on Team 1. And he always kind of was like that player that was kind of like the higher end of the skill ceiling for Team 1. He was always probably the one with more potential to join an MIBR or like a Furia or something maybe down the line. But dude, TRK is good.
Have you been watching any MIBR? I know you're over in Europe, Neil,
Yeah.
so you might not have been.
Yeah, I've been watching a bit. They look a lot better, in my opinion. Obviously, like Foreign said, I think Myron kind of was in the wrong roles, and he's really young. It was like his first big opportunity, and just getting thrown into like roles he's not really used to. I think really like suffered for him. So I think him going down a level maybe would be a good choice for him. I've like heard rumors that maybe he's coming to Europe, maybe, and playing in some like existence team or something, so maybe that might be better for him for now. But to answer your question, yeah, they look a lot better.
Here's an interesting question that I'll put a spin on. Should any teams be looking at adding Lekro, who is obviously a major free agent right now? So I think probably the answer is yes. So let me change it into something interesting. If you guys could add Lekro to a team, or where do you think Lekro would really fit in terms of a team in the Counter-Strike ecosystem?
Contact, Envy. Should I keep going?
I think he'll make any team that he joins better. I don't think there's too many places that he'll go to that could possibly make them worse. I think he's probably one of the in-game leaders or players that have gained experience at the right time to be able to evolve the meta of Counter-Strike to where it is now. He was kind of one of those leaders, especially he mixed like a Fnatic style like into his calling, as well as this just new meta of just reactionary CS, being able to pull out the best communication possible in like even the craziest moments, and that's kind of what I like about his style of leading.
Yeah, I think he's really good. Obviously, I think we did look at him a little bit when he got benched by NIP because it was really surprising to me because I think they were doing really well actually with him, and it was all of a sudden. But we'll see what happens in the future. regarding
Yeah,
that.
I will say one of the things that makes him extra valuable is, like, first of all, he's not just a guy who was only in one Swedish team. He was basically in all the Swedish teams. So he's already got like mad experience playing with a lot of different players. Whereas like the whole reason why when like Neo got announced as like the FaZe Clan IGL, the reason why I never saw that being a good move is like he's only IGL'd with 4 people. We don't even know that he is a good IGL at that point in time. So he's already got mad experience for someone as young as he is. And then secondly, he also is one of the only people I know as an IGL who is not lying when he says he could either be your IGL or just be the entry player. Like he could really just do both. Like I actually think here's the thing, I don't think he was like the best IGL, but he was a pretty decent one. And as just a player, he's a pretty decent player as well. So I actually feel like he should have more value than probably people imagine. Like he can definitely play in an international squad as well. It's weird. I know his on-camera personality makes him seem like he's like just like a typical Swede and like super boring, but he's a way more like fun guy actually if you talk to him. Basically he can open up a little bit. I think he's just like that around other Swedes. So I actually personally think he should be one of the more like eligible free agents in the scene. Really, there's a lot of places I could see him going.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
one thing also I can add on about Lecro or like people who have been at IGL, you got to remember, like from my experience, I know have been so many international players over the last 2 years. It's like a massive difference only doing Swedish teams than to lead an international team.
Sure.
Because I've had experience, for example, with Pronax when we were thinking about picking him up in Imperial. His brain was like 1 or 2 seconds lagging for a good like 1 to 2 months, he said to me, and like he was struggling really badly to like actually adapt mid-round to like what
Sure.
decision he had to think for a second, like what his reaction, what his call would be. It was totally different for him to actually communicate, and that actually happened with Asilian as well a little bit when he went from Flames calling in Danish for so long back to English. It took a little bit of time to actually adapt what he actually wanted in the system. So that might be a small issue for Lecro, and that was
Sure.
probably an issue for Neo as well, I think, when he went into FaZe as IGL. Like, it's a lot of pressure to go into a massive team like FaZe, in my opinion, to change your language. Like, you need to adapt. It's a totally different environment. So that could be a thing that Lecro might struggle with for a month or two. Not saying he can't do it, but...
Yeah, I've always felt that Lecro actually handles pressured situations, whether it's inside the game or dealing with teammates or different rosters. I always thought he handled them actually really well. He doesn't seem like somebody who's too affected by it. You know, it doesn't alter his mindset or his intentions or the way that he feels he needs to go about leading his team, which is a very important thing to have because that means that he kind of remains true to how he wants to lead his teams, and he trusts himself, and that's like a very key trait to have as a leader. So I'm optimistic about where Lecro goes, and I've always enjoyed him, like watching him play on Nib, Fnatic.
Also, got to be one of the more skilled in-game leaders. Like, there's
Yeah.
very few people have him like that guy does. Who, and while they're still the IGL, like obviously some people can do it, and then the individual game goes to shit. I thought he did a pretty good job of keeping his individual game together.
I mean, the last event, Road to Rio, was it, before he got dropped? He was like 1.12, and they cleaned the group. They were top of the
They were
group.
a very good team, yeah.
Like, and they lost really unlucky against FaZe 15-14, 3v2 after plants, and Brokey had a really good round. Like, anything that could have changed. Like, if that 30 seconds, they win that series. You don't know. He could be still in the team, right? I mean,
sure.
It was a really harsh decision to kick him, and I think the players actually didn't want to kick him, from what I believe. So it was really harsh. So yeah, I think it's one of the harsh decisions.
Would you guys agree with me if I said that the majority, if not almost all, of in-game leaders are performing well for their teams right now?
A lot of them are. I would agree. Yeah, I think quite a few are.
And what is it, do you think, that allows them to be able to do that?
I mean, I think playing online probably helps. Maybe that removes some of the pressure. Like, for example, one thing I always think is, bear in mind, people just look at the raw stats of players and judge all their whole game off that. Right? Imagine being judged on your stats in a game where the fan never even takes into account that as the IGL, you had your game end at 10 p.m. and then your next game's at 10 a.m. And so you just go, I'm just going to have 4 hours sleep so I can watch all these extra demos. And then you have to play individually as well. No fan ever takes that into account. They just act as though like everyone in the game was doing the same role. Like, he's way better than you. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, the stress of the events, like a lot of that must be lifted when you're just playing them online like this, especially if you're playing as many games as you have to. You can't prep for all those games. You just do what you can, you know.
It's weird. I expect
You have a theory?
Yeah, I do. And I expect there to be more people out there, more players out there that would actually prefer to not be playing it online. I mean, obviously
Yeah,
we have to, right? And it's not just because of the notion of like, okay, LAN versus online, because you're worried about how like these opponents that may normally crumble on LAN, maybe they play a lot better online, right? But even if you're comfortable, like players just not everyone has like instant comfort playing from home, like
Okay.
because I actually experienced some things where it's like, well, even though I'm playing in my apartment this very important game, I don't actually feel that comfortable being here, because I feel like with this kind of a game, it needs to be played, because my vision for this game is like, wow, like I need to be on a stage, or I need to be
Yeah.
sitting in a group. You know what I mean? This is
Sit around your teammates,
this is
sit
what I
around.
want out of the experience. So I'm actually kind of uncomfortable because this doesn't even feel right. This doesn't even feel right to me. But my theory behind that is because if you remember, watching Counter-Strike maybe in 2014, 2015, even going into kind of like 2016, and how the meta was played, and there was a lot of set strats, right? You kind of go
sure.
you go into a game with like a 10-round game plan. If you lose this round, this is what happens. This is our plan. Everyone kind of knows what's going on. You're playing more executes and things. Just the way that the game has evolved is allowed in-game leaders to have more freedom to play by their own rules a little bit more, their own play style, because in a couple of years ago, they had to play way more for kind of how their team needs to play, right? Like, okay, are we an execute heavy team? This is our strat book. We need to make sure that we run this strat book. We maybe have to play a few rounds like this in order to set ourselves up for these strategies or these tactics. But now it's a lot more reactionary. CS moves left and right, man. And if you're not keeping up, if you're not paying attention, if your communication, it has so much to do with communication now, even way more than before, because there's just more options for everyone. If you play a map like Inferno that is generally very straightforward, you have banana, you have mid, and you have apps, right? And normally, but back then, people would just make these very basic things like, okay, we're going to take apps, and then we're going to go take banana, or we're going to go take banana, and then we're going to go take apps. We're going to leave one banana, go take mid, and then we're going to go back to B, or we're going to split B or something. And these things are still played very often because sticking to the basics generally is still a good idea.
Sure.
But more players are able to do more things without as many numbers, so like one or two people can take an area by themselves because there's new grenades that people have learned, right?
Yeah.
The meta's evolved, and it's just not worth it when you're on CT side. It's not worth it to stay and take a fight by yourself, whereas people would do in 2015, 2016, and it's different how the game has grown up. So it's kind of like it's absolute chess now. It's not like this happens, we have to do this, because I still experience moments, even with my team, where like when we're thinking about resolving a problem, like, okay, on Mirage, we can't handle the other team taking mid on T side. Oh, well, very simple. We need to just fight them back on mid. There's way more ways than that now. Way more. There's 4, 5, 6 different options, and it really just depends on what your team is better at. Whereas 3, 4, 5 years ago, there was only 1 or 2 options, so you were forced, and if somebody that like an in-game leader, and you're not good in those duels, well, you're kind of just, you're thrown up, you're losing stats, bro. So it's interesting.
Okay, so let's get to some other questions right now. So there are a bunch of production questions, which we'll try and answer in a second. This is an interesting one. When Flashpoint 1 was announced, there were talk of community outreach for casters observers, but was unfortunately limited to third-party restreams of already broadcast matches. If Flashpoint 2 were to stick to an online setting, would it be feasible to invite outside talent for matches? So we had co-streams.
I'm just going to say this right now because that's an example of where someone heard something and then decided in their brain what it meant and then repeated it even though it never ever meant that. So at no point in time did we ever say we would do community outreach for talent, including casters and analysts. What happened was I said that I am on the lookout for people with my mind who I decide are good to invite to join Flashpoint. That doesn't mean I understand where the mistake is coming in. ECS in the past did do a community outreach thing. It's actually where Hawker and Dinko and all those guys came from, where they brought in some casting talent who were doing like online matches. So I can see where the mistake might be made. They might think that we were implying we would do the same thing or hold a contest where people could enter or do. We're not doing that, by the way. Like, in fact, I'll say explicitly I'm against that because I want this to be the biggest product. So I want the best people. So if someone makes it organically and I see them and pick them, That can happen, but like, there's no contest. Like, it's not. We're not going to have like a reality series where you come on and you fucking want to be a caster, and then you come on and I'm the guy at the end, Sam McCall, like, nah, Monty, you're going to have to say no for this one. Like, we're not doing that. Like, I wish we would. It'd be hilarious, but that ain't happening. Okay, just in case there's any confusion on that topic.
Also, it seems like the comment is a little bit confused with our co-streaming program because, for example, like Richard Lewis was doing co-streams, and like we're generally, I think, pretty down with co-streams.
Yeah, of course.
Especially in other languages and stuff like that. So, I mean, kind of my take on it is like it's a good opportunity for up-and-coming casters to get practice. I don't know what... I can't sit here and tell you, because Faceit handled that last time, what our exact qualifications are to be able to co-stream. But, you know, I think generally, like, we're pretty open to the idea of co-streaming under the conditions, like, about sponsorship and all the other agreements that we have, because it's important, obviously, that those numbers get rolled into our numbers for viewership metrics and blah, 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 blah. So there are caveats to that, but... And I will say, at least, like, from Thorin's point, the attitude is, do we want to feature people who are super good, who are up and coming? Yes. I mean, we already did that, but when we say up and coming, we're talking about people who are already at like DreamHack level events. We're not going to pull people off the street, right? That's not what we're going to do. Like, you have to have at least some level of professional experience. I mean, maybe there's a 1 in a million person that wouldn't have that, but I think that's probably pretty unlikely.
And also, just to be clear, we'll call you. Don't call us.
Yeah. In general, people are asking about when Flashpoint 2 is going to start. We're aiming for September. We said this on the show before. We're still waiting for dates from Valve about the RMR events and the major. Let's see here. Here's an interesting one. Will there be non-CSGO related content in Season 2 of Flashpoint, like the skit from CSGO Summit where Thorin tried different burger brands? I would say no. That's not really within our purview, but what do you think?
I mean, I didn't have that planned, but I do think fun stuff like that on the side, it's not impossible we could have it. I wouldn't say on the show, because I personally actually, despite the fact I did think that was a funny segment, I personally think stuff like that belongs on like a YouTube channel.
Or social.
CS Summit's a bit different because their entire thing is that it's all like funsies and stuff. So the difference is, like, for Flashpoint, I want the actual tournament part to have a level of gravitas to it. I want it to be like a serious tournament. So we can have fun within the bounds of the like analyst desk. But if we're going to do something funny like that, like I review food, in my opinion, that's like a YouTube
or a Twitter
video. Yeah, exactly.
So I will say that the difference, though, is like, for example, if it is a gameplay related skit that's kind of like, for example, where we did the Smooya like nature documentary Rat King thing, like we will do that, but that's directly related to the players and to Counter-Strike. It's just putting a twist on it. Or if we do kind of skits relating to analysis segments, I think that would be it. But I think like things that are purely not Counter-Strike related are very unlikely to appear in the broadcast unless it's like really funny. So I wouldn't say no, but probably not.
By the way, though, that segment, just to be clear, in case anyone's never seen it, just Google like Thorin Food Reviews Summit or something. It is fucking straight fire. Like the level of, put it this way, even to this day, I even knew when I was doing it at the time, but like it's aged even better than I thought. The banter in it is so on the edge. Put it this way, the joke I make about fucking Chick-fil-A alone, just read the comments in this fucking YouTube channel. It's amazing. People are losing their mind over the jokes I make. Just go and have a look. It's fucking straight fire. It is.
Dude, anything like that where like somebody gets to hear you like talk shit about something is just gonna be funny. It's just gonna be funny. You know, you should take like the quietest player in Flashpoint Season 2, like the absolute most introvert, just set him in front of the camera, tell him to say nothing, and you just do the whole thing while he sits there. And you just talk a lot of shit, and then you've got your complete opposite on the other side.
In fact, if people don't know, the whole concept of where that even came from, I believe, is that back in the day when we first started doing all the big events, and we used to do like 2 events a month, Richard used to just every now and then film when they were like, because he knows it triggers me if the food's really bad quality or it's like fucking cold or whatever. If he saw that he was coming in really shit, he'd be like, wait, let me set this up. Like, wait till he comes in, and then he'd start filming like, watching me going, "What the fuck is this?" Like the sausage, it doesn't even, the fork doesn't even work. He used to be filming it like, "This is fucking gold." And the thing is, when he put it on his YouTube channel, it was getting like 80k views or something ridiculous. Like, so I think that's why they did that segment, because like people don't know, but certain things I can't hold back on. And food's one of them.
Most things, some might say, from having been around you for 7 years now. Let's see here. Here's a good question for you, Nifty. What was the thought behind bringing Mihu and Calix to Envy, and how do you think they're doing in the team right now?
So the direction that I wanted to take the team was just more international. I wanted to keep Ryan as the only American that I knew of. We ended up finding Moose, which just ended up working out for us because he's a great asset to our team, really great teammate and everything. But my goal was like at least 2 Europeans, at least 2 people from around the world, just because they bring different perspectives of the game that I like to learn about. And actually, initially, I think I mentioned this maybe briefly after like a post game or something, where Mihu and I, we didn't work together very well in the beginning, and it ended up being a lesson that I needed to learn. But it was very interesting because he has this perspective of the game of how he played it in Virtus Pro, right? And then I have like, okay, here's how I played for the past 3 years. Here's like how it's evolved. Here's everything that I've learned. And basically you're showing me something completely different, you know, and that was really interesting for me to see.
But I think it's like refreshing as well, like to
yeah,
have, like,
no, absolutely. You know,
yeah.
I almost didn't know how to respond to it in the beginning because his personality is very serious. He's kind of a robotic dude. So he may sometimes come off like he's being a jerk, but he's not, right? He just wants us to be better. He just wants us to play and be as diverse as possible in the way that we play Counter-Strike. So when he was like introducing these ideas to me, you know, and I, of course, open to them, you know, but I just didn't really understand, okay, here's actually what he's going for, you know, and then it ended up having me to just be like completely open-minded, you know, and okay, really try to understand at a depth of like, here's what he's talking about, here's how he wants to play CS, you know, and then we can kind of switch on and off. And that's what we've been able to be very successful doing, you know, and it helped our team tremendously because, and I knew that it would, you know, because he is a very bright mind of Counter-Strike. I actually think that he should do or be involved with some sort of content that's educational about Counter-Strike because he's very smart. So once we figured that out, we instantly started getting better, and I was very happy about it. But the whole idea behind Mihu and Calix, you know, I just wanted to be more international because when I joined Renegades, I swear it was a blessing. It was just a blessing. You know, I got to, by accident, move away from the American scene because when I was in Selfless, playing with you know, 4 other Americans, I don't know why, but it just wasn't enjoyable. It just wasn't enjoyable, you know, and Renegades was so much fun. We went through a lot of dark places, but we also had a lot of fun as well, and it made the journey that much better. You know,
was Legia your coach? Was he involved with bringing Calix specifically in? Because obviously in Big he'd brought in Zantares, who's also Turkish. So was he somehow involved with this move?
So we decided all together. We
Okay.
had so it was myself, Ryan, Calix, Legia, and Hastro, and some other guys sitting in a conference room, and we like decided, you know, like, okay, we want to have Calix on our team. This is why he's here, so he can work out a deal with Hastro, you know. And then we talked about our further 2 options. That's how we ended up settling on Mihu, and then also Moose as well. So yeah, we decided all together, you know. But Legia, he is a big believer of, if it doesn't matter to him so much about the players that he has on the team. He is one of the brightest minds in Counter-Strike because he came from playing with Gob for like 10 years or something, and they're like best friends. You know, so for him, it's just all about how smart are his players, how willing are they to actually be great, how much will they trust him and his system that he's bringing into the team, you know, and can we follow through with it, right? Because Big, even when he was playing for Big, they weren't the most skilled team. He says it all the time. They were not the most skilled team by any means. They had Tabson, right? But you know, and they were still making top 5s in the world. You know, they were still playing very well at tournaments, and this is because they were the smartest team by his words. I don't know, but
No,
he
there's
says,
some logic to that. They had like a very
No,
high
I-
utility damage score, for example. Yeah, of course.
Also,
absolutely.
they probably-
Utility is a conversation that I could talk about for 3 hours now because of Legia. I mean, it's actually no joke. So
But big, like,
yeah, I
they
mean,
play 12, like, altogether their, like, routine is, like, 12 to 14 hours, like, a day. Like, they have such a good routine of what they do, like, and they're very serious in what to do. And, like, they could be up to, like, 12, 1 o'clock. I know they have Tel B that works very, very hard with them guys to make sure that they're the best as well. Like, and Goppy obviously is there now as a coach. Two of them together, they work really well, like, and they're
Yeah.
really hard working. And they always seem to, like, go up, then fall down, and then come back up somehow every single time. When you think big is gone, they'll just come and have a good result here and there. Like, so, yeah, they work a lot basically.
a lot of times those shifts, no matter how intelligent your players are or your team is altogether, and how well you play, like you're gonna have those shifts if you have great dips in fragging. You just will. It's just going to be part of it. If you have one player or two players where they just woke up on the wrong side of the bed one morning, they didn't take care of themselves necessarily and showed up to practice and they had like a bad day of fragging, they change 8 or 9 of their settings, suddenly they're out for the next 3 weeks from their consistency. You know what I mean? Like it can very well happen, and these things change. Yeah, man, but Legia plays a very important role in our team. So
here's a question for everybody. What would you like to see implemented in the Source 2 rumored update to CSGO? We'll start with you, Neil. What's the change that you would like to see based on an engine shift?
I think the FPS is dog shit for a lot of PCs. So hopefully they can improve on that. Other than that,
Maybe work with graphics cards instead of just a CPU.
no, but like, it's just even like, for example, in our team, like one or two had really bad problems, and they bought like $4,000 PC, and just still the game just runs so bad, man. I don't understand like what it is, but if they could do something about that, that would be awesome.
yeah, and I don't know so much about it honestly, so I'm not going to provide too much help on this question.
All right, I'll give you one. Here's one no one's thought of. This would be my #1 wish for Counter-Strike in any future version. Actually do an investigation into how to fucking publish games in Asia and then actually make it so that China and Korea play the fucking game.
It's been doing
In-game
better.
demo reviewer as well.
It's been doing better in China, but still, like, it's a drop in the bucket compared to the total player base in
Can
China.
you imagine a world in which they would have the success that like Dota 2's had in China or Overwatch initially had in Korea? If they had that success with Counter-Strike, it would open a whole new world.
Oh, no.
That's how you level the game up.
But why do you think that is? Why do you think CS is like not bad in Korea, but you know what I mean? Like StarCraft.
Basically,
I can tell you,
the way everyone plays games in China and Korea is they go to a PC cafe. In fact, there's even some players who famously play on high sensitivity because they just played on whatever mouse was in that cafe. They didn't know about mice. They were just playing games. So as a result, the way people discover games is whatever games are on that PC. And so what you have is you have a licensing agreement with that chain of PC cafes to like give them League of Legends or give them other games. And basically, Valve doesn't do that. Like you have to just fucking buy the game and you have to have Steam and you have to hear about it. And then you're not going to have a friend who plays it because you're in China. So every factor by which you would discover the game doesn't exist in those countries, basically. Like the guy who plays Counter-Strike is some weirdo. It's the equivalent to like, if like, I don't even know what a game, I like those fucking live action novels or whatever in the West, isn't it? You know?
I mean, in Korea, what happens is that Steam does not come installed on PCs at the cafes. So I literally have to go download Steam and then log in and then have Counter-Strike purchased. Now, Counter-Strike going free to play is obviously huge, but it doesn't solve the fact that Steam is not installed on these PCs natively. And also, the Koreans play a different tactical shooter called Sudden Attack, which is complete shit as a game, but it's still very pervasive over there. I looked up the stats yesterday, and it's still like the 4th most played game in Korean
That's the
internet
thing,
cafes.
Monty. Why don't they study how games like that and Crossfire got big in those countries and then do the same shit with a better product?
So here's the other, but as I think there are different reasons. For Korea, I think that's the reason. For China, I think, being owned by Tencent really helps you distribute in China, whereas Valve is a private Western company. And so I don't think the Chinese government probably wants to play ball with Valve unless Valve gives up a bunch of shit. Like Valve would have to play by the Chinese government's game to get wide distribution in China, and they probably don't want to do that. So I think in China, and although I will say Chinese player base in Counter-Strike has like tripled in the last year since it went free to play. I think many people have seen those graphs, but I do agree that a major push is necessary, but I don't know if it's possible for Valve to do that easily with the Chinese government. And at least in Korea, they've never made it so that Steam is a readily available thing in internet cafes. And, there's two ways you could do it. You could either make Steam readily available, or you could create an independent client for Korean internet cafes, but that's never happened either. Now, would Source 2 be a perfect time to do that? You bet.
Well, no, here's the sad thing, Monty. They did actually. They made something called Counter-Strike Online, which is 1.6 modded. Dude, that game was huge in China apparently for a while.
Yep.
But the point, and it used to even have on those charts, it would be like top 10. So the point is, they all basically, but the problem is they didn't do that. That was where, like, I think, like Nexon or someone licensed it and just made their own version. So it's just, again, that Valve doesn't have they don't have the ambition mentally to do these things, so they're not even looking into these areas, basically. So that would be my wish, though, because I think if you had a world where, I've said it forever, but it's just true, if you let 10,000 Korean people play Counter-Strike 12 hours a day, you will get some simple-level motherfuckers who come out of that country. I guarantee it right now.
No doubt, bro.
Think about how hype that would be.
Yeah.
Just the level of individual skill that we would see evolve from those regions would
be awesome. Yeah,
very challenging for the rest of the world.
Let me put it this way. As of yesterday when I looked, Overwatch only has 6% of the market share of PC bongs, the PC internet cafes. So only that out of all the total hours of games that are played, Overwatch accounts for 6%. In Overwatch League, the league is now 60% Korean. So think about that. What it would do to Counter-Strike. It would be pretty crazy. This is a conversation that really doesn't have anything to do with us at Flashpoint, but I will touch on it briefly. Why is Valorant not doing well in Korean internet cafes? I found out yesterday when I looked at the rankings, it was 9th place, only like 1.5%. The reason is because many cafes won't install it because of the Vanguard anti-cheat, like fucks with their entire, like if you install it, because the way in Korea, when I go to an internet cafe, like I get like a card from the front desk, and like I type, like basically they count your time and you type in that ID. So they're multi-user computers, and something about the kernel level anti-cheat seems to be affecting the internet cafe's ability to run their businesses. So they basically, what they've done is they've either dedicated certain PCs to Valorant only so people can play it, or they just refuse to install it. So Riot has some issues there when it comes to their anti-cheat software and how that's going. Andrews is streaming his Skybox tool, and he plans on using it. We did use it in Flashpoint 1. We will probably continue to use it. I would like to use it in a better way than we did last season, but we were sort of limited by the pandemic.
There's one thing, by the way, they could fix in Source 2. Make the demos fucking viewable, like by an actual human being, and so you can actually just move a timeline, not just skip like 700 frames or whatever, because that is one of the most infamous things anyone who's an IGL who's ever looked up demos knows, is that the demo player is fucking ass cheeks in CSGO. Like, it's offensively bad.
Dude, if it wasn't for these like third-party like demo,
we'd be fucked, wouldn't we? Yeah.
Like, man.
Those people are lifesavers.
It takes, if you actually want to see like great detail from one of these demos in the game, at least an hour. Least an hour for one demo.
I think what's been quite new in EU for practice-wise is, for example, a coach would stream from OBS into a private Facebook group, and then you can watch the game back. For example, if a round was kind of screwed up, or if a round is screwed up, you could all watch it back together. Or someone's like, oh, well, like, I did communicate. You can go back together and watch it, like, say, go back to the round and say, well, you didn't, like, did you? So that's the kind of new thing that's been brought in for that side. But yeah, the demo side is really bad. But there is a thing called Refrag that's come out recently, which is quite good. I think that's going to be public soon. That's quite nice. Yeah. Obviously, Skybox is good as well. I have it for the last few months. It's pretty good. Shadow is decent. So there's more third party kind of things that are out there now, which is nice, instead of the CS:GO dog shit like lagging all the time, basically.
I'm really glad that has evolved, like in the practice scene, because I remember, some teams would just straight cancel scrims or force your coach to leave, like if they thought you were like recording the scrims or whatever. But bro, you need to be able to record practices. You just have to. How you? It's not even possible. You'd have to have a whole role dedicated to just writing down, and it can't be the coach because the coach has to watch, bro. He has to be able to see what's going on, right? Because the guy writing down, even like, oh, round.
Listen, if it's good enough for Bill Belichick, it's good enough for us. So I also agree. All practices should be filmed.
It's no joke, man. Like being able to watch those back, but also hear comms from like TeamSpeak and stuff too.
Oh, agreed. Yeah,
it's a big deal because then you get to hear who's, because in the moment it's hard to recall. Like,
no,
okay,
here's the funny thing.
Shit comms. It's me who, you know what I mean? I don't know.
People probably wouldn't know this, but when Monty actually began in League of Legends, this is back in the days where like coaching was like way more primitive than it is now. You just give them simple details. One of the best things you could do back then was just work on people's comms and just tell certain people to shut the fuck up at times, or that you're literally commenting the wrong thing here. Like that stuff like that seems so minor, but that could be a massive game changer, obviously.
Yeah. One word can change around, bro. It's helped me so much just in-game leading, being able to go back and listen to myself, because I recognize that I may not have seen in that moment, like, oh, why did I pause there for 3 seconds? When that 3 seconds could have been used better just by me saying this. You know what I mean? So it's really
also
it's helped me.
The tone in your voice as well. Like if it's like panicky, like urgent kind of voice, that could like it just causes friction in the team, where if you're kind of like a more calmer IGL, not really a ragey kind of type, it really helps the flow, in my opinion, go in a team. But if you're like really like rushy, panicky kind of stuff, it kind of just messes up the whole environment and mood in the team and the official.
It's interesting when Legia joined, I had almost sometimes I guess it was dependent on just how we were practicing and the moods that were going around the team. But I had like an inconsistency to the tone that I used. And when we started going through these practices and watching them back together and talking about them, he was able to provide me with like good feedback to where like, okay, I totally understand what you're seeing here, and it's like, because he gave me an example of like, if my father, who doesn't know anything about Counter-Strike, listens to this, or if he stands behind you while you guys are playing, will he be able to tell who the leader is? And he said no. He said no. There's like maybe a 35% chance, because sometimes I'm a little too quiet. Sometimes I don't talk as much. You know what I mean? Or I might be saying a lot, but I'm just saying it low tone. But I don't notice that I'm doing it, right? I'm not doing it because I'm upset or emo or anything. You know what I mean? I'm just doing it, and that's just how I was doing it. So I wasn't conscious of it.
I think that's why Legia is like really good, because he's not like trying to talk to you like he's better than you. He's there to work with you, to help you, like to make you more as comfortable as possible. So the way he always approaches things is always like really good, and it makes you more confident in yourself, right? Because he's there for you, not like he thinks he's higher up or bigger than you. He's coming from Europe, all this kind of shit, like, So that's why I think you two probably get along really well, like inside the game and outside the game, because he's
absolutely. We're totally direct. We're totally direct with each other, and it's it's an important thing to do.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
One of the things that at least I was focusing on in comms, which also seems very basic, was it is very hard to get players not to curse in comms, but those are just extraneous words that they're adding. So like eliminating all cursing is actually extremely effective to cleaning up comms and making sure that they're pared down to just the essential information that isn't taking up a lot of time or brain processing power for the people that are listening to it.
I don't know, just because I don't speak the languages, but I don't know how often on like European teams, I don't know how often cursing is part of their comms, but I know in American teams, like depending on the ages of players that you have in your team, it will is there a lot or is there none? But because I know in like a lot of the tier 2 teams that start playing, players that just came from like MDL and now they're getting a shot, these players are used to coming like, fucking turn around, you know what I mean? Like just all these different filler words that are because saying like fuck is the same thing as saying and, but, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, throw the flash. Throw the flash. Instead of doing that, just say throw the flash.
Yes, exactly.
Flash.
Depends on the culture in Europe, to be honest, man. Like,
yeah, absolutely. I don't know why. It's just a thing with Americans, bro.
UK,
well. Like, you'll see it a lot with American teams.
UK, for example, curse a lot. Always curse. Always making excuses, stuff like that. Like, whereas like the Eastern European are more like the hard workers. I feel like Serbia is like the hard worker types.
They keep to themselves, kind of,
Yeah. Especially Finnish. The Finnish people are really like monotoned. Like the first thing when I spoke to Otto in 2018, I remember I DM'd him and was like, "Hey, you interested in joining?" When I was in Imperial back then, he was like, "Yeah, blah blah blah." He was like, "By the way, I have a really monotone voice. It might sound like I'm really bored, but I'm not bored. And I was like, it's okay, bro. It's alright, like, you know. But it was nice for him to say that instantly, you know, because his voice is very like straight, you know. He doesn't raise that like nice, you know. He's just like really just serious.
There's like that one. I think there's a couple like older interviews, maybe from like DreamHack, where like Sergey is just like standing there. He just or even Alu, but Alu's kind of a troll. I don't know. You know, where he just gets asked a question, he's like, "It was great."
Very flat, very like
you know, it's just
very serious. Man,
couple words, you know.
Here's an interesting question. Speaking of Serbia and Serbians, I actually didn't know this. So Complexity went to Serbia to boot camp, and G2 has been there, and some other teams also went there. Why are teams going there instead of other places? Because when I owned a team, we would send them to Germany, but I imagine it's much cheaper in Serbia.
Yeah,
no,
I'll give you all of it.
I'll tell you why. It's not,
Yeah,
it's
go
not
ahead.
about. It's basically in Serbia. It's non-session days or something like that. And for example, Russ and Obo have stayed in Europe for 90 days, and you can't stay in like the European countries. Where in Serbia, that's not like valid basically.
Oh.
So that's why they can't go to anywhere else but Serbia in Europe. That also happened with 100 Thieves when they were traveling a lot. So that's why they went to Serbia, because they don't run up the days, because
you can only be in Europe for so many days, basically.
Exactly, and it doesn't count in Serbia. So that's why people are more going to that country, basically.
I mean, it also, I'm sure, is
There's also good.
Oh no, it's very
Yeah.
nice. Really
I'm sure.
Refrag,
Yeah. I mean,
Refrag
I was in Croatia like last year, and like that part of Europe is super nice and super cheap right now. So I think it's generally also probably just a nice place to be and a cheaper place to boot camp. Like, you know, they probably could figure out other locations to boot camp in, but I'm sure the combination
it's really nice there. I know the guys like from Relog, they look after you really well, and like you said, foods and all that kind of stuff. I've been to Belgrade twice, and the food, you can go out for like 6 people. You can have a starter, you can have a drink, you can have main course like €70 for all of you. It's like really nice there. Honestly, it's underrated as a country.
It's interesting because the food is actually insane in Serbia.
Yeah, it is
very, very good.
Really nice.
But it's interesting because it has a lot to do with cost as well. You know, not just for the hotel rooms for the 14 days that you're in this boot camp or whatever, but you know, if it's it's different. Like 2 times that I've boot camped in Copenhagen and went to the refresh offices, you know, it was like even just to go from the hotel to the office, which was like a 3 or 4 minute drive, €20 taxi, €20 taxi, or you go for a 35-minute walk and you have to wake up earlier so that you make it in time for practice. You know, so and that's just for the taxi. You need to get a taxi back later or walk. Right. If you go over to like, there's this little mall nearby, you go over there, doesn't matter what you get on the menu, at least €20. And think about it, you got to do this probably twice a day, you know. So we went to the grocery store there and like shopped, you know, and it's just an expensive trip for everyone all around, as well as the hotel rooms and stuff. So Serbia it's convenient in that matter.
That's really nice. From when I went there anyway. It just feels better, like not spending €20 on like a 5-minute taxi or €20 full wear in Serbia. You pay like €5. It just feels nicer, right? In a team, if you're like, oh, it's just a lot nicer, you know, than spending so much money in Denmark, for example.
Here's an interesting question. So over time, Counter-Strike overlays started taking up more space on the screen, displaying more and more information at any moment in time. Would it make sense to test an approach of having overlays that show less information, so not everything is obvious, like it was in StarCraft Brood War, where casters had barely information, and therefore stuff was more exciting? So let me talk about. So I know about this because I've actually spoken to the Korean StarCraft casters about this topic. Many of them. It's not that they didn't have the information in Brood War because they were professionals, like they knew how to watch the game and understand when the upgrade timings, and you know, the observers were good, so they would sort of show it, but it wouldn't be on the screen the entire time. An interesting complaint that I have heard from Korean StarCraft casters has been that with the rise of StarCraft 2 and having all the upgrades and units like building on the screen at all times, it actually makes it harder for them to do their jobs of telling the narrative, because they can't like when the audience is distracted, all the information was in their brains in Brood War, and they were choosing which information to give to the audience to help shape the narrative and focus people's attention in the proper ways about what was important in the game that was unfolding. So many of the StarCraft casters that moved into StarCraft 2 and started seeing more and more of this shit on the screen actually didn't like it, because they felt that it gave too much to look at for the viewer, and they couldn't tell the story of the game as specifically. So I think I don't know if I agree with that, but I think it's an interesting conversation to have from a casting perspective in Counter-Strike as to how much do you really want to overwhelm the audience, especially for, let's say, more casual viewers who are there to follow the narrative that the casters are pushing. Thoughts?
Mm-hmm. I think, and I've never casted, so I don't have this experience or knowledge, but how I feel about it is when there's more things on the page to look at, I think um, it kind of has the casters often thinking about how to implement it into their narrative more.
Sure.
Whereas, but also, I think it can also make the difference between evolving great casters and like just like good casters, because when there's less on the screen to look at, it's just the score, right? And then you have like the people on the sides, and that's it. Um, you have to be very knowledgeable about the game, and because I listen to some casters now who I absolutely like won't name because everyone can always get better, but it can be very like just dull to listen to because they're not providing enough um, internal like game experience that maybe the players have to do with or the teams have been going through, and it can be hard to grab from if you've never competed. But you have to do your best to be able to put yourself in their place to provide the understanding for the viewers, because there's going to be a selection of that audience where it's like they want to hear you talk about all the different things on the UI and like the mini map and refer to this and refer to that. You know what I mean? And that's cool and all, but like I believe that the better way to do it is to be able, like, I'm going to shout out Jason Moses for a second, because I think he's one of the best casters at referring to in-game knowledge and what a player might experience, because sometimes the person he's even casting with may say something along the lines of like basic or standard to the situation, but then he will provide more depth because he has experience to pull from, but also he's able to put himself in their shoes and kind of understand at a deeper level, and then he'll convey that to the viewers very well.
Another person
So
who's like
I
underrated as
really
well,
enjoy listening to Moses.
like from Europe, is Maniac. I think he's really, really underrated. Like all the points you just made, that literally came to my mind. Like Maniac is exactly like that, and he's really like clear on what he's saying. He's not talking bullshit. He knows exactly what he's on about, and I really like listening to him on analyst kind of side. But I don't really agree on like you have to be just a player. I understand where you're coming from. Like a lot of people who have not really had the experience, in my opinion, I can't listen to them. Because they're just talking for the sake of it, right? Just like to just talk for the sake of it. And I can't listen to personally. I can't listen to people like that. But people who are very confident in themselves, they put a lot of research in it. They know what they're talking about. That's what I can listen to. And I like people who are like brutally honest. For example, like if someone calls someone out, for example, like yeah, it's good. That's good to listen to, in my opinion. It's entertaining. You know what I mean? Not this like scripted bullshit. Like I want someone to say like if they've been struggling for the last 2 months, and he can give his view why, and like environment, all this shit. I want to hear all this kind of stuff. It's really fun to listen to because it's different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it is like required to be like one or the other to actually be the best. You can totally know nothing about the competition behind Counter Strike, what players, the
But you think
challenges
it's
the
more,
players face.
rare, right? You think it's
Yeah,
like,
of course it's more rare. Of course,
yeah,
that's why
I
I think
agree,
it's
I
such
agree.
a challenge for like newer casters coming up that have just started kind of getting into it in the past like 2 years, maybe, or maybe close to like 3 years. Where they don't have that experience. They just know that they want to be a caster, and they
Yeah.
want to be able to. They probably focus on things like the tone of their voice, right? How loud are they being? Okay, I need to shift into being like a little bit more quieter during this 1v1 clutch, or they're probably thinking about these things a little bit more often, where people who just naturally will have a better understanding of the game or a deeper understanding, whether it's because they've put in like the work or the research for it or not, spoken to players even to get their kind of insights and stuff, to understand how a situation might work. um, they're kind of just like free balling it like a little bit,
But
and,
also
and like
like
it's okay,
the
but
best, in my opinion, like the most famous, obviously best duo in Counter Strike is two people that didn't play the game, right? Similar and Anders. So
yeah.
that's like
Yeah.
that I mean, and they're just
And
so
if you have a good dynamic bouncing off of each other like that, that
exactly.
that works. That works just fine, man.
They're,
I they're a
they're clued,
classic, right?
they're clued on. They're researching all the time. Their life is devoted to this. They know how to speak and how to approach stuff in certain situations. So there's a lot to casting, like definitely. But As you said, it's
The main problem I have with this whole issue is like I can't really put myself in the position of being the average Counter-Strike viewer. Like I'm going to make judgment calls based on what I want on the screen. Like I want all this info because then I don't even have to listen to the casters. I can just look at the utility they got. I can look where they are on the radar. I can figure out what the money is. Like I want all that information to make the decision myself. So the problem is I feel like I'd have to actually put myself into the position of thinking, what if I knew nothing about the game? Like, are there certain things in the example of the StarCraft case? Like, would it be better if I didn't always know the utility the team had? And I only hear that if the caster tells me they might not have enough utility for this take on B on Inferno to follow off all the protocols. Maybe that would be more exciting. I'm not against the premise.
It's a really weird
if
conversation.
I watch it, I want all the info. Obviously, I don't want any of that shit to be like I don't care about the spectacle of it or the surprise factor. I want to know all times what the money is and the economic situation and everything. You know?
Yeah. I mean, like for example, if the player model outline, if that wasn't on, I'd be so tilted, bro.
I think
that's really hard to watch without it. Like,
I think that would probably be on because it's good for the immediate viewership. The question is like I think one of the things that over my years of watching Counter-Strike, like now we see all the like ways the round was won. Like that was something that we did at Flashpoint. Like was it won by defusal? Was it won by time running out? Right. And the question is like, at what point is there too much garbage on the screen where a good commentator might have on their own, like you might give the commentator that screen. So so that they can make the decision about to bring it up if it's relevant, right? Rather than just like spamming you with infinity information, or whether there's an option like to have two different streams, one with all of the information on it and one that's more pared down with the same commentators.
Sorry, wait, are you done?
No,
I didn't want to interrupt you. Okay. Do you think that this like problem that we've almost encountered where there's so much going on in the UI has come from not often enough switching to other screens with all these graphics on them? Because like, with like ESPN type stuff, like they'll switch to all these different stat pages and all these different things. And when it comes to like the game, right? So let's just say talk Counter-Strike, it's very basic. You just have only the crosshair, you see everything else, right? The 5 players alive, who's dead. You see the radar, but everything's cleaned up and looking nice, but there's not too much because all these other things that you might want to refer to. Okay. Well, when you're in freeze time or when you're on like a pause or something, switch to this page.
Sure.
I'll give you an example of something that probably should be eliminated. It's just people haven't thought it through. Is like the money should probably only flash up during freeze time and at the end of the round. Like the caster would have it on his screen the whole time anyway. But like, why do I need to see the money when it's in the middle of the round and no one's saved, no one's, but like that is just unnecessary info. I'm constantly getting put in my eyes 30 frames a second. So
I always thought it was weird. I always thought it was so confusing when I see like, $32,000 on the T, $10,000 on the CT. I don't even care. What is this? What am I looking at, bro?
I'm sure.
One cool thing in the production that I seen, it was when I was at Starladder at Kiev. I think you were there for, and it was like at the start of the round they had like it was like posted on the back of the map on the wall like the player's picture, and he's like 10 kills, 6 assists, ADR. Like it was, you get what I was saying? You
basically they inserted it into the game, so it was like like an AR thing or what, the augmented reality type thing or some shit, right? A bit like they made the logos in the spawns, if you remember, for like the major or whatever. Something like that, right? It was a way to actually implement it in the server.
Yeah, that was really cool. I found like
looked pretty good, yeah. I was like, basically, it was a clever way to make you look at what would have just been a stat shot.
Instead of like switching pages onto it, like the game is still on. It's like nothing really changes. You just see it on the background, like next 11 kills, 6 blah blah blah. 2 entries.
That's a good idea. Yeah,
I'm with you. Like, that was really cool and very basic, but it's in your face as well as the round clicking down. And the guys are talking. It's just a nice little add-on, I thought.
I've got to go in 5 minutes, Monty. So do we have one last question or something?
People are asking about big. Most teams haven't made big moves to their roster and aren't top 10 in quality. I agree with you. What should we expect as far as fines go? The teams are discussing that. Flashpoint 2 happens in an online world. We don't know that yet. It depends on how things are going here in Los Angeles during the September-ish time period. Obviously, like teams got to step up and do things. That's up to the teams. Let's see here. Let's since we do have to go in 5 minutes, let's get a quick overview from Neil and Nifty. What's up next for Contact and Envy? What events are you participating in, and et cetera, et cetera?
Well, for us, it'll be just the RMR2 in about 12 days. It's going to be an interesting experience for us and not ideal whatsoever. We're going to have 2 guys playing from separate locations outside of the U.S. So, I mean, we're just going to have to do what we got to do. U.S. borders are closed. People had passport and visa issues. So that's the only thing that's going to be on our timeline for right now. And then as soon as that finishes, of course, we go into player break. So.
Yeah, it's the same for us. We're gonna play Road to Rio, then player break, and we're gonna go from there. I mean, we're not gonna be playing with the same 5 that we did in Flashpoint, not Flashpoint in general. I think some people have seen like there's gonna be roster change coming up in the next few days for us. So we're gonna practice with the new roster, because obviously our results have been not good enough, like just plain simple. And yeah, hopefully we can improve for Flashpoint and come back. I'm really confident that we can get results that we should be getting, to be honest. So that's it for us until the player break, really.
Excellent. Well, I think that will do it for our hour here. Thanks for joining us, Nifty and Neil. Probably Wednesdays at this time at noon. We'll continue this unless we have any more scheduling conflicts. But as far as I know, at least for me and Thorin, it's looking pretty clear right now, and we'll have to coordinate with the teams and everybody else. So we'll go ahead and tentatively move that to this slot. Thank you for coming by. We will see you more next week.